Welcome to the Build Your A-Team podcast, where we share how veteran entrepreneurs and business leaders build exceptional teams, and we uncover whether success comes from intention, strategic analysis, intuition, or is it just pure luck? Today, we have Brian Handley on, and Brian is the president of Palmer Food Services, where he is in charge of I think 285 people, correct? You
Yeah,
oversee that.
we're up to about 320 now
Okay.
through an acquisition recently. But
Oh,
yeah,
congratulations. Very cool. Um, and then prior to that, Brian, you've worked in a number of organizations, Wegmans, Raymour and Flanigan Furniture, and then Constellation Brands, and now Palmer Food Services. Brian he served as a infantry officer in the Army through a ROTC scholarship, and you also have a, ROTC scholarship from the University of Richmond and an MBA from Arizona State. What I do want to highlight about Palmer and Brian is that Palmer Food Services has been named 2024 Independent Distributor Marketer of the Year by the Certified Angus Beef Association, or Certified Angus Beef, which is the marketing arm of the American Angus Association. So that was during your tenure, right? And then also Brian was individually recognized in the Rochester Business Journal 40 under 40. He was recognized as the Member of the Year by the Veteran Business Council in Rochester as well. So please help me invite Brian. Excited to have you.
thanks for having me, Freddie. I'm excited to be here.
Cool. Yeah. Well, I usually like to ask just immediately up front, with all of your experiences and with uh, just the positions you served in, what do you think your superpower is?
Superpower. It's funny that you asked this. I was recently asked this at a training that I went to for resiliency in leadership, cultivating resiliency in leadership. And when I started, they went around the room and asked, name, what's your position, what's your superpower that you're bringing? And for me, it was vulnerability. It's the ability to be authentic and say when I don't know something that I don't know something, right? And the ability to lean on other people and surround myself with the cliche better leaders than you in order to be successful. And not see that as a threat, but see that as a strength of the organization. So right now, when I'm thinking about it, being my honest, goofy, probably falling short self at work and being okay to communicate that with the people that are around me and the people that look up to me because they are looking for authenticity in leadership. And having that vulnerability to admit when you don't know something, I think is a superpower that you're not often taught when you're a young leader coming up through the ranks.
I completely agree with you that through that vulnerability, you can build trust, right? And hence
100%.
shape actions and behaviors of folks, but also just you don't have that kind of pressure over your head to be somebody that you're not or act in a certain way that you're not, because that obviously falls short. So really
Yeah.
cool. I like that. I like that trait, and also like later on that vulnerability piece I want to get into a little bit more. But before then, can you tell us, as the president of Palmer Food Services, like what is it that they do? What does your day-to-day look like?
Yeah, so Palmer Food Services, we are a broadline food service distributor. So what does that mean? Basically, if you want to run a restaurant or a food and beverage operation, we can get you anything you need to run your restaurant, with the exception of furniture and booze, and we can probably get the furniture if we needed to. Um, we have over 2,000 clients across New York State, Connecticut, and New Jersey. And those 2,000 clients range from individual owner operators. So think of your favorite mom and pop restaurant, sub shop, pizza shop, all the way up to large universities, casinos, and chain restaurants. So it's a 24/7 operation, very, very tight order to cash cycle. And the thing that differentiates us from the large players in the industry is the way that we service our clients. So we don't have the purchasing power to play with the Cisco's and the US Foods of the world. These are multi-billion-dollar publicly traded companies. So how we differentiate ourselves, Freddie, is that service aspect. We're willing to do whatever it takes to make it right for the customer at any given time, any given day, 24/7. We had a associate that worked with us for a very, very long time, recently passed away probably a year ago, and she would always say the answer is yes. What's the question? And that mindset is what kind of guides us day to day when we think about what our customers need. We're a silent partner in the food game. When you go to a restaurant, all the accolades are to the chef, and we love that. You don't know how that food got on that plate, but we were a small part of that. So we're with people when they celebrate big milestones at restaurants. We're with people when they're having a wedding at and having it catered. We're with people when they lose loved ones and they're grieving and they want to eat and console themselves with food. We are a silent part of that. And it's the service that we provide to the chef who's preparing the meal for you that distinguishes us.
Awesome. How is it that you came into a food services business? I know you Constellation Brands, you work with spirits and wine, but before that was furniture. I mean, how did you
Yeah.
find your place here?
Yeah, so this particular role, it was an executive recruiter that called me. Our company is 175 years old. So we are on our fifth generation of owners, all Palmers. And there isn't a sixth generation in the company currently. So Kip Palmer, our owner, was looking for someone to come in and run the day to day. For 48, almost 50 years, his father and then him have run the day to day of the operation. And Kip has a couple other companies, one of which is much larger than us and is looking to reach out internationally and start shipping to Latin America, to the Middle East. And he wanted to focus a little bit more of his time there. And he needed somebody to come in and run the day to day. So in 2019, November of 2019, I got a call from an executive recruiter. I was working for Constellation at the time. I was landing in the Sacramento airport, heading to Napa, where most of my colleagues lived and worked. And I got a call about this beef manufacturer and wholesaler in Rochester, New York. And I said, thanks, but no thanks. Pretty busy, loving life on the alcohol side of the business. But something just wouldn't let it go in the back of my head. And I got a couple more calls from the recruiter. One thing led to another, and I started doing some research about the company. I fell in love with the story of the organization. Longest tenured organization based here in Rochester, New York. The family history, the focus on quality and service. I decided to give it a chance and look more into it. Then March of 2020 happens. The world shuts down. The food service industry completely grinds to a halt. And Kip decides not the right time to bring on somebody else. We don't know how this is going to shake out. Meanwhile, on the spirit side, I'm running a couple spirits distilleries for Constellation. We can't keep this stuff on the shelf. Biggest issue is not creating the ethanol, it's finding glass to put it in, right? So I'm running around like crazy. Business is really, really good on Constellation side. We go through the summer of 2020. Things start to slow down a little bit. Kip wants to re-engage. I get to meet him and his wife, Amy. We have a bit of a courtship from September through December of 2020, and he makes me an offer to join the company. So that's how I got here. How I got into the operations and supply chain space, that goes back to the Army. So as an infantry officer,
Hmm.
did the platoon leader thing, did the company executive officer thing, and then right before our second deployment, our battalion S4 leaves for the career course, and I was asked to take over as an S4. Never did a ton of logistic stuff before outside of the executive officer role, and just kind of fell in love with moving boxes as much as anybody can fall in love with moving boxes. And that's why when I transitioned out of the military, I got my MBA in operations and supply chain management. So through all the companies I've worked for, it's always been warehousing, transportation, or manufacturing logistics.
Awesome. You found your niche
I
there.
did. I
And
did. Absolutely.
but and you made it work for you. Some people think that's their niche, but then they get sidetracked and go other ways. But you were obviously performing well, and you stayed put. So specifically about Palmer, you got in when it was chaotic, March of 2021, a year after it was declared, right? Everything shut down. We were still struggling and figuring out what the next few years would be like. How was and you mentioned that what drew you was the just a service mindset, right? How was the organization um, that you entered into, and how does that compare to like the transformation that you brought to it?
Yeah, when I think back for almost over 4.5 years now, it's a much different organization with the same values and the same culture. What I mean by that is when I joined in March of 2021, the entire world was opening back up from COVID, especially here in New York, very, very locked down during the majority of 2020. And then restaurants, bars started to be able to open back up again. And nobody on the food service distribution side was really prepared for that. We had either furloughed people, cut labor, really, really scaled back on what we were able to do and accomplish to save money through that time. And restaurants opened up with such a bang. Everyone had this pent up desire to go out and spend time with people, and they had a ton of extra cash to spend. We weren't really ready for it, and no one else was. On top of that, the supply chain had really dried up.
Mm.
So it was tough to get protein. The packers were not slaughtering heads like they were pre-COVID. Supply chains, international supply chains for food had dried up and really, really become constrained. So not only were we dealing with a lack of labor, we were also dealing with supply chain constraints. So it was a very, very chaotic time. And just trying to keep up led to a lot of very, very long nights and stressful days.
How did you build like what was your first order of events there? And you obviously needed a team. How did you think about building that team?
Yeah, I was fortunate enough. So not coming from food and bev, Wegmans is a grocer, worked on their distribution end. Obviously, Constellation Brands, manufacturer of alcohol, but no food service specific experience. And why that's important to understand is the order to cash cycle on the food service side is extremely small. Our customers have till 5 p.m. today to submit an order that can be dispatched as early as 4 a.m. tomorrow morning.
Mm.
And some of our customers are COD. So they're literally handing cash over to us as we're delivering. So you're talking about anywhere from a 12-hour to almost a 24-hour order to cash cycle, day in and day out. Um, the biggest issue we had when I joined was operationally we were not staffed, and we did not have the processes in place to deal with that increased order volume. So we had an individual who was running our operational department, and it was one of those Jim Collins. He should be on the bus, but he's probably in the wrong seat.
Mm.
Super smart guy. He's genius level intelligence. He is, when I talk about the organization, I often refer to him as the brains of our operation. But he was running a large operational team where he was more built as an analyst and a behind the scenes ideation specialist than a frontline leader to rally the troops and get them through really, really hard nights. So my first hire or my first move was not an external hire. It was a reallocation of this person's role, forcing me to step in as the director of operations. So I'd run warehousing, transportation, manufacturing before. I could slide into that role briefly to kind of stabilize things and move Chris to this kind of super analyst role where he could tell me and build the tools that I need to see how we were performing day to day, week to week, year to year, because we did not have those tools when I joined. There was very limited data analytics, very limited KPI reporting, anything like that.
So you made two and two equal four, right? You made it make sense, right? Right,
In
or
some
five
cases,
for
yeah,
him.
for
Um,
sure.
so that's interesting for you to say. How long was that when you were in? Like what at what point was it 6 months or when did you
Yeah,
make that?
so yeah, so when I joined in 2021, of March of 2021, Kip had a almost year-long training process for me to go through because I wasn't from the industry. Once we got into about April, mid-April, we realized that the wheels were falling off, so to speak, really, really quickly, and I needed to dive in. I needed to pause my onboarding, my training, and just dive right in and help with the operations. So that was in the first 6 weeks we made that call, Freddie.
Yeah, that and that gentleman, how long was he in with the company prior to?
So he's been with the company 20 years now. So he grew up with the company, is from a little town south of here,
Yeah,
high school diploma, taught himself how to code, taught himself Power BI. Like I said, genius level
genius.
intellect. Yeah.
Yeah. What
But
took, yeah,
yeah,
it was his, I guess his strength was overlooked, right? And his ability and
absolutely.
put him in the right seat. I mean, 15 years with the company before he made that move to something that's, he can, 10x his output. What, why do you think that? Why do you think that happened? Like, why do you think this is a common problem? Why is that?
Yes.
Why is it so common, you think?
Yeah, in our industry, it's such a fast-paced industry that there's
Mm.
not and tiny tiny margins as well on the food service industry. So when you find someone that's really really good at doing something, you let them do it, and
Mm.
then it's almost that Peter principle where okay, you're a really good transportation router, you'll probably be a good transportation manager. Sometimes those things aren't the same, right? And the skill set that made you a great router might not make you a great transportation manager. So you get promoted to that level of incompetency. And in this case, do not get me wrong, Chris was not an incompetent
All right.
director, but he was stretched beyond the things that he was probably best suited to do and most comfortable doing. And really spending the time with him. So him and I spent, hours and hours and hours together working on this problem to fix operations and getting to know him. It was very, very, and listening to him, it was very, very clear that his skill sets and his happiness were tied to other work and giving him the ability to do that. And he created the position he's in right now. And he keeps building out his team and taking that ownership. And it's super rewarding to watch him be able to do that.
Yeah, to bring in somebody from the outside, come in with a beginner's mind, ask why, and try to understand, and it forces the organization to revisit some of these things that they may have overlooked for years. So that's what you brought. Is that if you look back at your history in your career, I would bet that that was common for you
Mhm.
at all of these, just putting the right people in the right seats. And is that intuition, or what do you think you know leads to that?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I always loved in the infantry how they moved us around every 18 to 24 months, how we got to do a different role. And I loved that beginner's mindset, as you put it, of someone, okay, you're a platoon leader, you do your 18 months as a platoon leader. Now we're going to move you into either a scout platoon leader, support platoon leader, XO, to give this other viewpoint that maybe you wouldn't bring in if you have the same person in role for a long time. When I join organizations, the biggest, and not even join organizations, but the biggest kick I get out of life is watching people succeed where they thought they could not. And I was recently talking to a friend about a 5K that my daughter and I recently did. She's 14 years old, not very athletic, hasn't really done a ton of athletic events. She's more drama, dance, theater kid. And I got her to sign up for a Veterans Outreach Center 5K here, which supports our local veterans community. She was super nervous about it. We walked the whole thing, but about 2/3 of the way through, she looks at me and she's like, "Wow, Dad, I can really do that." And to me, that was the most rewarding parenting experience I've had in a very, very long time. Just to see her eyes light up, the realization that she could do something that she never thought she could. So when I think back to joining organizations, it's the same thing. It's maybe somebody's stuck in a position where they're not feeling heard or they're not feeling successful. How do I get them to a place? How do I help them realize that they can achieve things that they did not think possible? If we go back to the Chris example, there are so many tools and processes and changes that Chris has put in place over the last 4 years that he never thought possible in the first 15. And that's just giving him that bandwidth, giving him the authority to really make those changes and trusting him that he's going to make the right decision for the organization.
That I love that story, especially with your daughter. I mean, first time running 3.2 miles, and then just her eyes lighting up at 2/3 at mile 2, just like, wow, I can do this. That's a beautiful story, a beautiful lesson that you're teaching. With this example with Chris, um, I I want to I want to try to translate this. I think this is a very important piece, right? Just coming in with this beginner's mindset for people who are listening right now, who may be running businesses, who may be just going 100 miles an hour all the time, to maybe when they're looking at their biggest problem, to say, all right, how do I come up with this beginner? How do I approach this with a beginner's mindset? And 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 then after identifying a possible solution, putting it in place, because you've done more than just say, all right, Chris, this is you, let's put you in here. But you had to backfill the role, then you had to give Chris guidance and guideline of how to think about his new role, give him a
Yep.
goal, left and right limits. I mean, you did all of that to make him successful. So if you were to think about this, an advice for a veteran business owner or just a business owner saying, hey, you have a big problem, how would what are the steps? What would you say are
Mhm.
logical steps for that?
For sure. I think one of the things that you said in framing this problem is running 100 miles an hour, right? And
Mm,
when you're running a business, sometimes the day just gets away from you because you're running 100 miles an hour and you don't have a good plan day to day or week to week to tackle that, right? Sometimes you run the day, sometimes the day runs you. The first step I think anybody can do is detach from that 100-mile-an-hour sprint. If you're tackling a big problem, the best thing you can do is somehow break away from it, whether that be not coming into the office, taking a work from home day, or whether that be a breathing exercise where you can take a morning, right, and journal out the issue, focus on your breathing, calm yourself down from that 100-mile-an-hour sprint, just creating that space between you and the immediate problem. Clarity often comes in those situations. A long walk, a run, time at the gym where you're not listening to an audiobook, you're not listening to a podcast,
Mm.
except for this podcast, of course. You're just creating that space
Mm.
where you can think and let your mind wander. I think that's the first thing for me. The second thing is an outside perspective. You don't have to hire someone. You don't even have to, hopefully, you wouldn't even have to hire a consultant. The way that you and I know each other, Freddie, is through the CEO circle, IVMF CEO circle. I've learned so much from my peer group on that team that none of them know the space I'm in. None of them really know food service distribution, but I've learned so much because they don't know the industry. They're coming with outside perspectives. They have that, as you say, beginner's mind to look at problems from a lot of different angles. And they've got a ton of different experience that I don't have. And that's super valuable. So leaning on those people, right, across the organization. And then it comes down, and then the final thing within the organization is listening. I often say, I don't have all the answers, but there's 320 of us here in the organization. Somebody or a group of people do, and it's similar to our time in the military running a platoon. You don't have all the answers as a brand new platoon leader. Heck, you probably don't have 10% of the answers. But if you've got a good platoon sergeant, you've got good squad leaders, they've got the answers. You just have to listen to them and empower them to make those decisions and drive forward.
I like that a lot, Brian. The first part you were talking about, it just reminds me it's tactical patience, right?
Absolutely.
Even in a battle, even in a fight, just having a little bit of time to be patient, assess. You don't have to always be go, 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 right? Because sometimes, yes, the worst decision is no decision, but to hastily make something so quickly could be disastrous as well. So just having a little bit of patience for things to unfold and for you to kind of think through options, I think that's really great. I do want to ask a little bit about just looking at hiring for you, right? You have a very short cycle time from order to delivery and being paid. That, if you can call it a cycle time, but you have a very short time. Just professionalism of your employee base is important. The yes and mindset, right? That mindset is important culturally. And I would assume you have a lot of turnover, like part time. Do you have turnover? How does that look for these people delivering and the front lines of you? And how do you assess for that quickly? And how do you build that culture for the people that are doing successfully?
Yeah, so a couple different paths of recruitment. So the individual contributor on the ops side, the warehouse laborer, the CDLA truck driver, the manufacturer, manufacturing line worker, those are all that fast-paced, higher turnover type role. We're recruiting from rural parts south of us as well as inner city Rochester. So that's a very, very important role because they interact with the customer more directly, but it's that blue collar, probably we're getting kids that are family recommendations or referrals, friend
Mm.
referrals, don't have a lot of training in the space. So we've got a very robust training and development platform where we get our arms around them very, very quickly, make sure they have reliable transportation. A lot of these kids are dealing with stuff, and I use kids because they're 18, 19, 20 years old. They're dealing with stuff outside of work that
Mm.
I've never had to deal with. Very, very challenging lifestyles. And and getting our arms around them very, very quickly, telling them all the resources that we can get them to make them successful. That's one path that people join us. The other, on the professional side, is a lot of chefs that are burned out in the industry. So being a chef, running a restaurant, extremely fast paced, really stressful, not the healthiest lifestyle in the world. A lot of these guys and gals want to start families, so they join us thinking that being a sales rep for food service is a little bit easier. It's different. Not sure it's any easier. So that's another way that people join us. And then the executive role, when I'm looking for people and recruiting for people, I'm looking for two very, very distinct things in a person, Freddie.
Mm.
I'm looking for someone with a servant's heart and a warrior soul. And what that means to me, the warrior soul is someone who, like Carol Dweck reminds us, has a growth mindset. Someone that either has experienced challenges in their life organically or seeks out challenges for growth. They see obstacles as a way to grow as an individual. So when you go through the interview process, getting to know these people, asking about challenges, how they framed those challenges. You can tell by the way they talk about challenges in their life and how they've overcome those challenges and what they learned because of it, how much better a person they are because they had those hardships, whether they be, organic. I got sick. I had a sick child or family member. I'm taking care of a parent, or I've lived a pretty decent life, so I'm going to go out and I'm going to train for a marathon, or I'm going to go skydiving, or I'm going to do a long hike, something like that, where they can push themselves out of their comfort zone for growth. And then on the servant's heart mentality, it's that yes, and it's that yes, what's the question? It's the having a sense of pride and looking for a way that you can put others first. And that's what we're looking for in that executive level. And that's the culture that we've built here over really decades. And then I've had a chance to hone over the last 4.5 years.
Fair. That's awesome. How many, what's the percentage if you track it that you're right in selecting that
Yeah.
type of person? Do you know?
I don't at my level.
Yeah.
Right now, my senior team, we've only had one turnover since I've been here. So the C-suite of the company, really, there's only one person that I brought in that has not worked. So I've probably made 12 or 15 direct hires so far in management around the company, and one of
Wow.
them really hasn't worked out that well. On the individual contributor side, 3 years ago, turnover was very, very high. The great resignation was very real in our industry.
Mm.
And there was a lot of wage inflation on the warehouse and
Mm.
transportation side. From our perspective, though, once we right-sized our training and development, got our arms around people, made them feel like they were part of a family here, we had much better retention, and it's gone down year over year over year, the turnover rate.
That's awesome. What I liked about what you said before was you looked for those two things. You knew exactly what you're looking for, right?
Yeah.
I see a lot of small business owners. They know, or they think they know, like the skills required, right? This is the technical capabilities for this role. But for the intangibles, a lot of people just go back to the values, or it's kind of ambiguous. But
Yep.
you knew what you're looking for, and you
Absolutely.
knew in every answer that some type of um, version of them showcasing the servant's heart and then the warrior mindset is what it is. So that's really cool to hear, right?
Yeah.
That to me, just it shows me that you've hired a lot of people. You understand how to do it, right? You understand that process. So that's really cool. Um, well, I mean, I got a bunch of other questions just like on tactical level, how you run your business, how you think about it. I'll just ask one more and then we'll pivot. I had Rudy Cazares on the show,
Mm.
and he runs several in New York City. You know him well
Yeah.
as
Very.
well, and he runs Amazon lines and also for UPS, I believe. But what he showed me was this scorecard of each employee, right? Each driver,
Mm.
each employee of his organization, and how they do well. And it's derived from like his experience, and also just Amazon being a behemoth of
Yeah.
a organization. But it was interesting and it was fascinating to see like how is their performance being rated on a weekly basis, and then feedback. What Rudy's doing with that is giving feedback to their people so that it's a constant learning thing. Do you have something like that in your organization where it's metric based and quantitative and quite visible? And do you provide
Do.
that feedback? Yeah.
Yeah, so the way it works for us, and by the way, Rudy, I love watching him on podcasts or hearing him talk. Anytime I get a chance to see what he's doing on LinkedIn when we're not together, super inspirational. And having living in the final mile delivery segment like I
Mm,
do, what he does in New York City is a whole nother level.
mm.
You know, it's easy to run a tractor trailer up and down the New York State Thruway, but when you're trying to deliver parcels in Manhattan, man, I don't envy the guy. It's incredible what he's running down there.
Fair.
Um, but from an individual KPI perspective, we do have that. We're a big Power BI user. Each of our stats, whether that be the individual warehouse selector, a warehouse replenishment operator, the number of pounds that we cut or process through our meat department. All of that stuff is tracked daily and it's available through Power BI and Microsoft Teams. So every one of our associates has Microsoft Teams and they can see exactly how they're doing to their previous rates, to expectations. And then we are a big believer of pay for performance. So a lot of our associates are on a pay scale based on how well they do on weekly or daily measures, depending on what their role is.
Beautiful. Yeah, my guess is that a lot of people who may listen or hear about this, they're small business owners, right? And we're figuring or entrepreneurs figuring it out. But yeah, having that specificity visible, I think that's clear. And for a company, I mean, Palmer's is rather large. It's not giant, but it's still large. And having an investment in that to track performance, it really is rewarding for you. So,
Yeah, and when you talk about the size of the company, yes, we've got massive screens throughout all of our warehouse
cool.
and
Wow.
dispatch offices that show everything. But I've experienced, growing it myself organically at larger companies, but not having the resources to do that. Just throw up a dry erase board, right? If you're tracking something by the hour, lay out every hour on the dry erase board, put your standards on there, put the actual metric, and eventually task your supervisor to do it. Task the individual contributor to fill out the metric board. Hey, if I was supposed to produce X number of widgets between 11 a.m. and 12 p.m., how many did I actually do? And have them write it out. Once they get that ownership, they'll buy in more to the
Yes.
accountability piece and they'll outperform any metric you give them if you've got the right people in place.
Right. What gets measured gets managed, right? What Drucker
Absolutely.
used to say. So, um, okay, I do want to pivot a little bit in this conversation with just work and performance. Before this, you mentioned that you work with Ben Britt back in the
Did
day. Ben Britt was he was a classmate of mine at West Point. Just a just a rugby player, giant. He's a big dude, but he had such a gentle soul, right? Great guy. And he died in combat. But so I'm very passionate about this issue or this field, or this topic. I'm involved with the Strong Gray Line, which is we specifically focus on the niche of grads, West Point grads, and the deaths there because stats are showing that it's more and more suicides, right?
yeah,
More and more just deaths by suicide are more and more common with PTS. So we have an incentive or we have an initiative to really address people with those type of problems in an anonymous way. We're going to be launching that very soon. Very, very excited about that. Um, to tie it back to you, you know, tell us a little bit about kind of your tie with Ben and
Mhm.
why you were passionate about veterans as well and
Yeah.
suicide as
So
well. Yeah.
absolutely. As you had mentioned, I was an infantry officer with the 101st. I did two deployments to Iraq, '03 to '04, and then again in 2005 to 2006. That second deployment in '05, '06, I was the battalion S4 officer, so the logistics officer deploying an entire battalion, getting them, the beans and bullets that they need to survive. And one of the additional duties that that role undertook was as the Mortuary Affairs officer for the battalion. We were forward deployed in Mahmadiyah, Iraq, which is just south of Baghdad. And we had really no logistics support and no professional mortuary affairs brigade or support team with us. So when we took casualties, and unfortunately we lost 21 brothers during that deployment, it was my job to um, collect, identify, and transport the remains of those soldiers to Baghdad to turn over to the formal mortuary affairs support unit up there. So it was a great honor to do that. It was also an extremely emotional and spiritual burden that I took on myself. My battalion executive officer, a guy who I still work with today, he works for a leadership consulting company that does work for us. He tried to pull me off that detail multiple times. And I remember we didn't come to fisticuffs, but there were some pretty strong conversations where, a 20, 25, 26-year-old young man thinks he can do it all himself and takes on that burden and doesn't want to share it with anyone else because I didn't want anyone else to experience or feel what I was going through. And Ben was one of the soldiers we lost during that deployment. So when I saw your memorial bracelet with his name on it a couple days ago doing research for this, Freddie, I knew that this was going to be an impactful and a meaningful conversation for me anyway, to look you in the eye and say, wow, we knew someone, we served with somebody, we had a mutual brother that we both lost. And when I got out of the military, I ran as far away as I could from the veteran world. I didn't want anything to do with the VA. I was a fairly broken individual at the time, a lot of PTSD, probably self-medicating more than I should have or more than anyone should. And through therapy and being introduced to meditation practices, I was able to heal myself a bit and live a healthier lifestyle. And only recently have I started kind of sharing these stories with other people and how critically important mental health is to not only the veteran community, but I'm finding the more I talk about it here at Palmer, the more people gravitate toward opening up with their own stories and supporting one another through traumatic experiences.
Yeah, that is the power of vulnerability. Awesome. And you're leading by example there. And I what I do, I don't know if you're willing to go into depth here, but just your struggles, like when you say mental health struggles, from my understanding, it was severe. It was
Yeah,
severe. And
it
it
was.
and you were, yeah, I don't know if like I'm curious here, like what was that turning point for you? Even that specific session you had with a therapist, or do you recall that? Like, can you just tell us like the gravity of it and what that
I
turning point?
can.
Yeah.
Yeah. When we talk about veteran suicide, it was very real for me. I was definitely suicidal, and my wife at the time was very concerned about me. She wouldn't let me leave the house without my dog. At the time, we had a pit bull mutt, Daisy. I loved her to death, and it was always, when I was having a tough time and felt like I wanted to run away, or into the South Mountains of Phoenix. the dog would always be there with me because she realized that I probably wouldn't hurt myself if I had Daisy with me, which was true. The I can't remember, Freddie, a specific moment. It was more a gradual getting up every day and focusing on the things that I knew were healthy for me. So I had a wonderful therapist who had worked with Vietnam vets before. He understood where I was in the cycle of PTSD, and he was able to give me some tools, not the least of which was meditation, to help create that space. You know, we talked about running 100 miles an hour on a business problem. It was the same for me on the personal side. I felt like I was just going, just running 100 miles an hour inside, heart racing, feeling really distraught, like I wanted to hurt myself. And meditation, a daily practice of meditation, let me create that space to realize everything was going to be okay. You know, and in Ranger School, I had the silly thing, oh, I'll just quit tomorrow, right? I'll just quit tomorrow, and tomorrow never comes, right? It's the same thing with this. There are people out there that love you and want you to be here. There are tools that if you don't know about, people can teach you, and just commit to yourself that if you're going to do it tomorrow, because tomorrow will never come.
So yeah, I too shared that mindset, right? Yeah, in Ranger School, like yeah, quit tomorrow, right? That was commonplace amongst all of us, and it put just pushing that and never coming to fruition. Um, I feel, and I don't know specifics or stats or anything like that, but I just feel that there's a lot of people that don't reach out, like that first step of saying I need help. It's due, I don't know, it's due to a lot of different factors, I presume, but you, what was it that helped you take that first step, and what was it for you?
Yeah, I think it was honestly, it was a realization that that I was not right.
Mm,
It was, you know, my ex-wife. She was the one that kind of slapped me back into reality, and she was the driving force behind trying to find help in terms of therapy and connecting the dots between, because I was scared to go to the VA. You know, especially at that time, you heard horror stories about people just getting caught in the logjam of the VA or the
mm,
bureaucratic nightmare that it might be dealing with them. So we found somebody that was outside of the VA structure, paid cash for it, didn't even use health insurance or anything for
mm.
it. It was super worried about the stigma that came with what I was dealing with, and that I was less than because I was feeling these things, right? I wasn't the strong male, hard charging former infantry airborne ranger that I thought I should be, right? And that's where that connection came from. But then I guess it's kind of always been in me to be a little bit vulnerable and say I need help. And in those closed door sessions with Joel, that was the time where I could say I need help, and realizing he wasn't judging me. Right? When we talk about taking that first step, it's anything with suicides, with PTSD, but also with addiction. Right? The first thing is admitting you have a problem and realizing that in AA circles, no one is going to judge you because they've all been there before. And it's something that that community wants to help you through. It's the same thing here, the veteran community. We want to help everybody through, right? The goal is that we get rid of this epidemic of veteran suicide, and we're all here to help.
Yeah, so thank you for that. Thank you for what you shared. I too, back in '06, '07 to '08 was impacted and just had the PTS, PTSD, PTS, and I didn't necessarily say to myself, hey, I want to find a different route, to end my life or anything, but it was just so much of a burden. It was in everything, like all my thoughts, right? And just, failure, or just there's no hope kind of in this situation. And I sought out PTS, counseling therapy through the VA though, and it worked out for me.
Yeah.
And just cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, what they did, it helped me just like understand, just understand a little bit more, like what are the triggers, right?
Hmm.
What do you do? Like,
Yeah.
and how do you just go through that piece? And if you keep it objective and just understand that you can help deal with it. Um, so for me, it was a lot of, and during that program, my recollection is that there was a lot of journaling as well.
Hmm.
I don't know if you did a lot of journaling.
Still do.
Yeah,
Every morning. Yeah, I'm
good.
journaling every morning. And, sometimes it's work stuff or sometimes it's kid
Sure.
stuff or family stuff, but there's always a trigger there. When I'm feeling down or anxious or something,
Hmm.
journaling really helps me focus on what are the things around us and what are the things around me that are causing me to feel that way. And, back to creating that space between the the problem that you're dealing with and your reaction to it, creating that space. Journaling helps with that a lot.
So can you tell us, like, what does your morning routine look like, with meditation, with the journaling? How do you typically start your day?
Yeah, I wish I could say that I'm not one of these, the new Andrew Huberman, don't eat or don't drink caffeine for the first 90 minutes of the day. That's not me. First thing up in the morning, slamming a bunch of water and electrolytes, and then right to the coffee and journaling. It's almost immediate.
Mm,
Um, Sit down for, it's never very long. It's 10 minutes, it's 20 minutes of journaling.
mm,
And then I break away for 20 minutes of Zazen meditation, which is me, breath work, staring at a blank wall,
mm,
sitting cross-legged, um, just focusing on nothing in my head. So
mm,
thoughts will come in, let them come in, thank them for coming, and let them drift off, not getting fixated on any one thing. And that creates that kind of baseline that I need to operate for the rest of the day. So up at 4:30, that first hour is journaling, meditation, and then starting a workout. I almost have to work out in the mornings
mm.
because if I don't, the rest of the day just goes crazy.
Sure,
And by 6, 7 p.m., it's already, I don't have time to work out. And I'd rather spend that time with my kids anyway.
sure.
Um, and then it's into the office. So we have a couple different sites. We have locations in Buffalo, New York, Rochester, New York, Syracuse, New York, and Utica. And depending on the day, Freddie, it's in one of those locations. I could be at our warehouse and manufacturing plant.
Mm.
I could be visiting customers. It could be, here in the office, talking to people like you. And yeah, this is the not the most rewarding part of my day. That early morning is the most rewarding
Mm,
part,
mm,
where the world is quiet. It's still dark out. Most people are still sleeping in. I'm getting up before them to do the things that I need to bring myself to a place where I can interact with people on a daily basis. I'm quite the introvert, so every day dealing with people, shaking hands, kissing babies, all of the stuff that
mm.
you have to do as a president, that can drain me at the end of the day. So if I don't have that first kind of 2 hours to stabilize, it's a much harder day.
Yes, I tried meditation for a while, and I still occasionally do it. It's so hard in the beginning to just focus on nothing, because
Yeah.
you end up thinking about something, right? You
Hmm.
end up thinking about, and you're like, oh man, I did it again. But it's also those moments, for me at least, it was like you give yourself grace and say, okay, now you recognize it and let it go and go back to it. I think that was, yeah, there's a lot that benefit, comes from just having a quiet moment, and meditating. So,
I've been meditating for 20 years now, Freddie, and
mm,
sometimes still I find myself just counting the breaths. When I'm sitting
okay.
there, I'm counting the breaths as they come in, count one, let it go, two, let it go, or one, two, one, two. It depends how stressed I am. If there's a lot going on in my world, it's super hard to try to clear your mind. So I just focus on the feeling of cold air rushing in and warm air going out.
Awesome. I love it. Well, Brian, thank you for that. I just to bring it back kind of full circle. Um, as you see yourself, as a business leader and a veteran, and just doing what you do really well, which is, I mean, I would argue leading, right, through transparency, but you're impacting and you're building relationships and you're relating to your people and team. How, what would you say that people can do better, or you observe there's a problem with business owners or veteran business owners? Is there anything that you can offer to them, you know, a tip, your trick or something where you're like, hey, this is what's really helped me, problem solve or identify or just keep going?
Ask for help and listen, genuinely listen.
Mm,
So don't think that you have to have all the answers, right? Typically, you do not have all the answers, and create a circle around you, a kitchen cabinet, if you will, of people that you can consult when you run into an issue and ask and then genuinely listen. Sometimes we ask, and then that second part, not genuinely listening, gets in the way because you think you've got to ask, but then you don't listen. So those would be the two things for me, Freddie. When I was coming up, and even now, I catch myself. I think I have to have all the answers. I got to prove myself, and sometimes I don't. Sometimes it's asking for help and being genuinely open to receive that help.
awesome, Brian. Thank you for your vulnerability. Thank you for your insights. Really appreciated this, and I had a blast talking to you. Hopefully, this can also help somebody who may be going through a process, right, or their own
Absolutely.
journey. So for the rest of the listeners, I appreciate you tuning in, and it is now time for you to go build your A team. Thanks.